Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome and thank you for joining us in this webinar on a unique focus for the ultimate team performance. I am Emil Eji, your host for this webinar. This session will be of 45 minutes along with a Q&A session. This webinar is conducted by Synergita. Synergita is a cloud-based performance management software which not only automates to resolve all employee performance review pain points, but also enables employee engagement, employee training, and development through its unique features. The first presenter for today's session will be Debbie Vyskocil, president of Optimal Edge Performance, a data-driven high-performance consultancy leverages her expertise in neuroscience to teach audience how to reach peak level of achievement. With an electrical engineering background, a psychology degree, and an extensive neuroscience training, Debbie's unique combination of science and emotional acumen leads to her work with some of the business world's highest performers. She trained with coaches who focus on the head game for Olympiads, World Cup champions, and the US Special Forces. As a TEDx speaker, writer for the Naval Institute, Medium, and Thrive Global, she mostly recently founded Edge Women Speakers. The second presenter for today's session will be Shubhra Gupta. Shubhra is the performance management consultant for Synergita. With over 10 years of experience in driving technology adoption for top multinational, including Microsoft, Oracle, and Salesforce, driven towards helping business leader transform their business through technology. Before handing over the control to Debbie, here are some housekeeping instructions. All phones are set to mute. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat window located besides the presentation panel. We have already received several questions from the registrants, which will be answered by the speaker during the Q&A session. We will continue to collect more questions during the session as we receive and will try to answer them today during session. In case if you do not receive answers to your questions today, you will certainly receive answers via email shortly. Thank you for your participation and enjoy the session. Over to you, Debbie.
Thank you. Hello. I want to give you a quick insight into the way that we look at peak performance before we get started. Our tagline is, we create high-performing teams by winning individual head games. If you think about it, and think about it probably more in a sports context, what is it between Olympiads? The ones that go to the Olympics are all amazing. All of the speed skaters are absolutely incredible, but what puts that one on top of the podium above all of the others? Many times it's their head game. It's what's going on in their head. We use those exact same tools for business, and that's where today's program is coming from. So think about your current team. Picture what peak performance would look like for them. If you work with an entire organization, think about the company as a well-oiled machine, the ultimate version of itself. What would that look like? Now focus down to the team that you're a part of. And what would a peak performing team look like? I'm sure they have great attributes right now, strong members and great potential, but we want to look at what you can do to take them to the next level. So they might be stars already, but what do they really need to be amazing? If you have paper in front of you, just for your own insight, just write down a couple of missing qualities that need to be developed to make them a high-performing team. Perhaps they need to collaborate a bit better. They need to be more inclusive of all team members. Maybe they play it safe and need to be more innovative in their thinking. Or if they were more agile in their selling, you would have more clients. Now, when you look at them as at their peak, let's roll it down into the individual components. Most of you are probably doing a 360, but I would love to take a quick poll and just find out, is everybody doing some sort of 360 in your company? Emerald, could you put up a poll for us?
So 80%, sorry. So, Debbie, 67 percentage people have answered as no, and 33 percentage as yes.
Okay. So for those 33, if you could just put it in the chat, and we won't read them out right now, but I'm just curious, how many of you that do a 360, was it a one-time occurrence? It was a special deep dive into the company, or is it something that you do annually? And for the rest of you, maybe you'll get some insight on good ways to look at putting a 360 together before today. For those of you that use that data, what do you use it for? Or if you don't do a 360 quite yet and you're in the midst of putting it together, what do you see as the best use of that data? Is it to increase self-awareness? Is it to create a culture of openness? Or is it to empower leaders and employees with knowledge of areas for improvement? There's so many 360s out there that really it's determining what your end goal is before you get started. And when we're talking about a unique process to peak performance, we really want the most effective data that we can get.
So, Debbie, most of them have the 67 percentage is answered as empower leaders and employee with knowledge of improvement.
Oh, terrific. Good, good. And that's exactly why sometimes we want to customize it to make sure that we're getting exactly what we need. And if you could tell me, what are you looking to learn from your 360? Is it for growth areas for your leaders? Is your end goal? Is it to get a perception gap analysis between the feedback and the self-review? Or is it to create action items addressing the gap? And then just a thought, are you getting the best return on your effort and system? I love data, but I'm all about the most effective data that's really going to get you where you want to be. It's not easy doing 360s. It's a ton of work. And if you're the person that is putting that together, it's an awful lot of analysis. So really honing in on what's important to you is great to keep in mind when you're getting it all set up.
So, Debbie, people have answered 33 percentage for each option. And now,
Okay,
so 50 percentage option goes to the third one, create action item addressing the gap. So most of
that's
them have
great.
answered that. Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. And that's exactly where we're heading, is what do we do from here? Today, we're going to take a brief look at 3 of the personal masteries that we've identified that are necessary for peak performance. There's actually 6 that we've identified, but we're on a shorter time limit here. When I train teams, we spend a minimum of an hour on each of the 6 to do a deep dive and really look at the neuroscience behind it. When we're finished today, I'm hoping that you'll gain some insight into how your team could achieve those qualities and how you could start looking at them a little bit differently. So right now, what's your team's greatest challenges? Is it talent retention, leadership development, engaging your workforce, or attracting top talent?
So Debbie, 80% of the people have voted for leadership development.
Okay, terrific. Well, and that really impacts all the rest of these, because if your leadership is really on top of it, then your talent is going to stay and everybody's going to know about it. So you're going to be attracting more great talent. So our first step is to increase that self-awareness of the team and of the organization. Excuse me. And that is where we're really going to be seeing how a leader sees themselves and how they see the organization. If you can't see and you can't accept exactly where you are right now, how do you really move forward? And how do you know when you've made progress? Recently, I was invited into a marketing firm because employee absenteeism had increased by 300% within the last year. Andy, the HR manager, was first to recognize that there was an issue and not having any success getting to the bottom of the problem. So we went in and did a deep dive and did a personal 360 with his team to find out what was going on. There were some people that left unexpectedly, and there were some that were just taking an awful lot of time off. The other problem that Andy saw and what he first recognized was that people weren't giving more than what they had to the company. In the past, they stayed late into the evening, there was a ton of energy, and all of a sudden that was gone, and people weren't putting in that extra 10% when it was needed. They were only doing what they absolutely had to do. When we looked deep into it, we found that one of their managers had recently been promoted into this position. And though great at what his job was, he wasn't a great manager. And he had some problems with his impulsivity and his reactivity. So just think about it. How impulsive is your team? How often do they stop and think before reacting? We refer to this as a lack of personal discipline, the skill to minimize reactivity or impulsivity, to stop before reacting. It's critical for anyone in a client-facing position, whether that's sales, whether it's tech support or customer service. Discipline is critical to increase the empathy, enabling their optimal outcome. And it's crucial for those leaders to increase the engagement of team members. Perhaps you've worked for someone or with the manager who really showed their feelings when they learned something. And unfortunately, it had a negative impact on the team. That stopping, taking a moment is critical. Viktor Frankl referred to it as between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. It's a skill that needs to be learned. Our natural tendency is to react, to say what we think. But a leader that does that really can impact in a negative way the entire team. In neuroscience, when we look at the brain, what we're talking about is a natural tendency of impulsive action. But in your prefrontal cortex, in the front of your brain, in the part of your brain that's developed last, where the executive functioning is, we refer to it as the brake. It's what stops you from saying what you really want to say sometimes. And for some people, that functioning has not been developed. For whatever reason, their brain is firing, we don't see them being able to put on those brakes before they react. What happens when a boss is angered easily? What kind of an impact does that have on a team? We have negative consequences if a boss is reactive or if they show their anger on a regular basis. And that can cause the team to crumble quickly, and it can disengage everyone that is not part of that team. So becoming disciplined is finding that space. It's letting that prefrontal cortex do its job, the ability to calmly and cognitively come up with a solution. A good test or a good tool that we use sometimes is getting people to practice listening, waiting, and then reacting. It's not necessarily an easy thing, but sometimes when you just train people to stop and listen a little more effectively, you can get them to wait, think, and then go ahead and give you a response. It's one of the basic ways that we can help managers to get rid of that. When do you use your 360 to bring discipline and to build discipline? Most of the time you'll hear from your team members if there's something going on, and if a manager isn't exercising good discipline, self-discipline. And just working with them one-on-one with some coaching can sometimes get you to a really good place where they stop and listen. A lot of times they're not even aware of the problem. It's just how they react. And so working with those leaders to bring that self-awareness to what's going on and how it's affecting the team can make a big impact on its own, especially if it's not intentional. The second point, our second mastery, is resilience. The ability to recover from or adjust easily to change, stress, and misfortune. The skill to bounce back when things don't go your way, or when they're blindsided by a client, a coworker, or just a life event. The United Nations has declared stress as the epidemic of the 21st century. Up to 90% of all visits to a medical professional is due to a stress-related disorder. And the top 3 stressors in the U.S. are the economy, money, and work. And these days, change is a huge part of that. And we're hearing more and more about how the change in an organization is bringing stress to the team members. So how resilient are you on a scale of 1 to 10? How quickly do you bounce back when something goes awry? 1 being not too resilient. And on the other end, 10. This isn't your first rodeo. You've got this, no matter what it is. A few weeks ago, I was at a friend's birthday dinner. My friend grew up under communism, came to the U.S. for medical school, and now is a very successful doctor here. I was sitting with 2 of her friends who also came within years of each other from the same communistic state. And we were talking about their lives before they got into medicine, before they got to the U.S., and their life when they were growing up. One of them asked me what I was speaking on at a leadership conference, and I said it was on self-compassion as a crucial component to resilience. And she said to me, "What is this resilience you talk about?" And her friend just smiled. I kind of laughed. I was like, "No worries. I think you've got resilience under your belt."
So, Debbie, people have voted 60% for 8 to 10 and 40% for 6 to 8.
Okay, great. So that sounds wonderful that you are nice and resilient. So how resilient is your team? When things go wrong, when you try something and it fails, when the team puts something out there, how quickly does the team bounce back? Recently, I was reminded of the critical component of resilience on the entire team. I was having some problem with my website. One of the pages just went down, so I contacted the company that handles my URL. And I was on the phone with tech support, and he needed to put me on hold for a minute to check with somebody else. And I was busy, I had him on speakerphone, and I was busy responding to emails, so I was fine just hanging on hold. He checked back with me 2 times, informing me that they were still working on the problem, and did I mind waiting? No, I was good. Getting back to me, was fine, and it was my priority for the moment. On the third return, he informed me that he needed to escalate my ticket to a higher level of support, and they'd email me when it was fixed. Okay, they've always followed up in the past. It wasn't an issue. He then went on to thank me for being a long-term customer and for my patience. You know, the standard script that you get. But this time he stopped, and he added a heartfelt thank you for being so kind to him. He said, my last call was a man that was incredibly angry about his problem and was yelling at me. At one point, he started swearing at me. You've restored my faith in human beings. Sometimes I think we forget that our team really needs that reinforcement of resilience because it's not always an internal challenge. Sometimes it comes from the external side of things.
So, Debbie, people have answered 33% for 8 and 10, 6 and 8, and 0 to 2.
Okay, terrific. So you're obviously one of the leaders as far as resilience goes in your team, from what the numbers show, which is wonderful because then you can help spread that to the rest of the team. With resilience, this is the cycle that we go through. You try something, you fail, you pull the emotion out, take the lesson, and move forward, and you do it again, which is such a simple graphic and sounds so simple. But what happens for most people on our team? They try something, they fail, and then they get stuck in that emotion because it was something that meant a lot to them, or they really put their heart into it, or they really put a lot of energy into it. And so letting go of that emotion, not beating themselves up, is where they get stuck before they can take the lesson and move on. So the best practice we can do with people is to help them erase that emotion, to let go of that. So much we hear these days, especially in regards to, I know the tech companies I work with, and I read it everywhere, is try and then fail quickly and repeatedly. But letting go of that emotion when you've worked really hard on something is incredibly difficult. So sometimes with our team members, it's reinforcing that you did a great job, it just didn't work out. That it wasn't you, it was the project that we did. It was the client's response. It was whatever, be honest. But letting go of that emotion is key in order to take away a lesson. Otherwise, you can't find the lesson behind all that emotion, and the emotion swallows up everything. And the goal always is to get back up to peak performance in the shortest amount of time. So Richard Davidson, he's one of the leading neuro researchers in the country. He's up at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, published a study in the Journal of Neuroscience that stress and anxiety, when it's aroused by a threat, can profoundly disrupt the ability to think clearly and perform more complex tasks. So when we get stuck in that stress, in being anxious, that something didn't work well, that something's coming, that we failed, that something bad is happening with the changes, we get stuck and we can't perform those complex tasks. What we see in the brain, if you think about it on a very basic level, whenever there's stress, we don't need our cognitive thinking. If you were running from somebody chasing you, you don't need to do complex math. And our body naturally goes back to that place when we stress. And so we need to be able to calm down and release that stress, those feelings that we failed, in order to get our brain to function at a higher level again. So just with your team, even just helping with that release of the emotion can make a huge impact. And releasing that stress. So, most companies, and I'm sure most of you have wellness programs where you're talking about things for your health with stress, but it's how we access our brain, our cognitive functioning. And so helping your team to learn how they best handle stress and better ways to deal with it make a huge impact. So that's a great place to start with your team so that they can start bouncing back just a little bit more quickly. Fourth point that I wanted to touch on quickly is focus. It's critical for peak performance. It's critical for your analysts to be meticulous and timely in their research, for your sales teams to keep their energy up, and your marketing team to prioritize their objectives. We hear so much about distractions these days, and my goodness, they're every direction that we look. Researchers in Canada recently surveyed over 2,000 participants, and with the help of EEGs, Microsoft was a part of the study. What they found was just since the year 2000, the average attention span has dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, and they see it dropping even more. We talk about open workspaces and how that's distracting, how electronics are distracting. And really honing that focus has become more and more of a challenge. For high-performing leaders, it's not just about being able to focus on one thing. They have 3 levels of focus for a high-performing leader. First of all, there's pinpoint focus. It's what we normally think of with focus, where I'm working on a task, I need to get it done. I'm writing an article, I need to get that finished right now. I need to be on task and be totally focused on one thing. Then the second level is concentration. It's easiest to think of with a project manager, where you not only have your specific task, but you need to keep an eye on maybe 5 or 6 projects. You're a manager, you need to keep an eye on all the projects that your team's doing. So you need to be able to shift between that wider focus and that pinpoint focus. And then third, especially at a leadership level, the global focus. Because at times you need to shift to the economy, your competitors. You need to be able to open that up. We look at it as open focus. And a great leader needs to be able to shift between these 3 levels of focus seamlessly and keep moving. So what's a great tool in order to be able to do that, and it's helpful for all of us when we're trying to focus? A lot of times what works best is to be able to find one thing, kind of your home base, so to speak, that you go back to, that you can concentrate on. It might be something visual. I have clients who will concentrate, their home base is their daughter's smile, and they will go back there. So you're working on a task and doing things, and when you need to shift, instead of just shifting over to something else and still carrying over some of those thoughts, just take 2 or 3 minutes, focus on your daughter's smile, maybe on some math problems, maybe counting your breath for a minute. Just settle that down, let go of everything you were concentrating on and everything you were focusing on, and then move on. Then you can concentrate on multiple projects or on the economy. But having that base place that you go to lets your brain let go of all those thoughts that you had on this previous task and be able to move on to something different. We often hear about electronics messing with our focus, and it's far too true. You heard mine accidentally go off. I apologize. The number of times that we're interrupted during the day by our phones, by alerts, maybe by emails coming through on your computer. Every time you're distracted by something, you've lost time on your task, and then you've lost time having to realign your thoughts to get back to that task. When people come to see me, even though you've read 100 times about shutting off all those alerts, and I swear it's because they're paying us to come in the door, when I tell them to only answer their email once an hour and shut off all the alerts, they actually follow through. And when they come back the following week, they will tell me that they got so much more work done this week because the alerts weren't going off. So how many times have you been dragged away, pulled away from what you were doing because of the alerts going on? And 99% of us, it's not a life or death situation that we need to be alerted to. So shutting off those alerts is key. What you can do is set a timer, say on your phone, for an hour, 60 minutes, because I'm going to dedicate 60 minutes to this task. And then you don't have to check the clock either. So you can be 100% involved and focused on the project that you're doing. And the alarm will let you know when that hour is over, and then you can go ahead and check your emails or whatever else you need to do. And the other critical component is sleep. I can't help but talk about sleep because it is so critical to everything we do. As far as the electronics go, you've probably read the studies. Those blue lights that emit from our electronics disrupt our REM sleep. So if you use your phone or your tablet for an alarm, turn it over at night so that it doesn't light up every time a news alert comes through or anything. It only goes off when you want it to go. Forbes has recently estimated that the U.S. companies, just due to insomnia, have lost over $63 million a year because people don't function well if they don't sleep. And your brain can't function at its optimal level if you don't sleep. So that's a whole nother webinar that we'll do at a different time. So the unique solutions to help you creating your optimal performance are to increase the focus, the discipline, the resilience, and then go to sleep. It's probably the best way for me to put it. And it'll take you back up to the top again and to a higher level. Supra?
Hey guys, good afternoon, everyone. Can you see my screen? Quick housekeeping.
Yeah, you can carry on.
Awesome. So again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for such an informative session, Debbie. Really appreciate. You covered some key points around empowering HR through regular pulse surveys and 360 feedback. I'm just going to expatiate on those points and talk about how a digital solution really comes into play when we talk about things like employees' performance, engagement, development. So unfortunately, employee engagement is at a historic low in the US. Only 33% of the employees really feel engaged at what they're doing. So how do we motivate these employees? How do we help them to bring out their creativity, make them feel more accountable and more motivated towards the work they're doing? To facilitate this high performing workforce, it's necessary to have modern systems that encourage feedback, frequent check ins, collaborative assessments, skill development, and social recognition. In short, we are basically talking about focusing on holistic employee development. And that's what we help you do through Synergita. All right. So when we talked about 360 feedback, what would a good 360 program look like? I think the most important thing would be for it to be really flexible. You should be, as a HR person or as a leader, you should be able to initiate a 360 review anytime, be able to add, delete stuff, questions anytime that you want to. It can either be obtained as a part of a regular yearly appraisal, or it can also be initiated separately. You should be able to do it for a group of employees, for any specific department, or the entire organization. You should have the flexibility to have internal reviewers, external reviewers, or both, and there should be a no count on the number of reviewers. But what all of this is going to do to you, why would you need this? Primarily because this gives you a complete view of your employees' performance, not just a manager's bias. Sometimes that affects employees' final review, but actually getting a 360 view in terms of how the ecosystem, for example, the customers, the peers, or partners think that employee is doing. So things that I spoke about from an administration perspective, it's very important to have the kind of flexibility, resilience, for example, it's mentioned here. So being able to add any kind of qualities, any kind of questions on the go, make edits to the forms. A lot of the options out there for 360 are pretty rigid in terms of the questions that are already set in stone and the options that you have to choose from. So just getting, but there are options available which would not be so stringent about their needs or their formats. So you can have, any kind of questionnaires. You can have the reviewers anonymous when they give their review so that you get a realistic view of your employees' performance. You can get some beautiful reports out of this. For example, this is something which I've seen as very popular in the leadership world, which is a spider analysis, where you can measure yourself against what you think and what others think. And you can actually have a breakdown as per every competency and everything which you were measured on, and see what are the areas. It also suggests what are the areas you should be working on and how you can improve to remove that gap between what you think and what other things about your performance. So it's a constructive way of thinking about improving yourself, improving leaders, giving them positive, constructive feedback in terms of, hey, maybe these are the things or these are the trainings that you should be taking in to actually improve on this competency or work on this competency. You also have the option of doing engagement surveys anytime. That's again another thing. So pulse surveys is what a lot of companies call it. Being able to set the survey anytime. It can be a survey as simple as, where do you want to do your annual picnic this year, right? But you need your employees' feedback, because most of the times people don't show up, like my husband's picnic. So with that being said, you need to have everyone's input into things that you're doing for the company, because it's an effort that you're putting, and you want your employees to feel motivated and engaged through this. So my last bit is basically, what are you going to get while you're using these powerful reports, and how can this help you improve or elevate the employee experience? So any kind of surveys really help you, or they help the employees individually to improve self-awareness. It also helps you to create a culture of openness. Employees feel that their opinion matters and it's important what they think. Also empowering leaders. I think a lot of people are concerned about the leadership, which again, I would not know if I'm not a good leader. In my world, I would be, unless somebody tells me that maybe I need to improve upon a few things. So one of the challenges I see is employees probably would not want to just come and say you're not a good leader, but technically, you should have these surveys and these kind of options for employees to actually voice their opinion. You should be able to engage the workforce while, actually addressing some of the common challenges we discussed before in Debbie's slides, like attracting talent, retaining the top talent, engaging your workforce on a real-time basis, some of the top challenges which I keep hearing all the time. So basically, surveys are a great tool to improve your company's culture. Culture is something everybody's talking about, and this is what you're going to be enabled with using any good 360 feedback or engagement tools or questionnaires. With that, I would turn it over to Emil and Debbie in case anybody has any questions, and thank you for your time, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie, and thank you, Shubhra. And Debbie, there are a few questions for you. So the first
Okay.
question is, how do you measure the resilience level in a team?
How do I, in the team?
Yeah, how do you
Okay.
measure the resilience level in a team?
It's not a black and white number, and that's why I did a 1 to 10, because it's really kind of what you see as to how the team members bounce back. Sometimes it's easier to look at a larger project that a lot of people are engaged in, and then you can see it. If it's maybe it's the sales team and you're going after some new clients and it doesn't, a new initiative doesn't work that well. Well, how quickly do they start thinking about different ways compared to just, oh, woe is me, this didn't work. So a lot of it is, you can do it as a team, but you can also look at the team members individually, and it's something similar. Unfortunately, it's a little more of a self-assessment for most of us. When I see it, when we hook people up, when I'm training individuals, we will put sensors on their head and we look at the EEG and we will have them get in a good place. And then we will introduce a stressor and we'll see the way their brain waves just really kind of dive when that stressor happens. And then we see how they come back up individually and how quickly they can get that back up to that good, healthy place. And then we repeat that and we keep tweaking that and coaching that. When it's a team, it's a little bit more difficult and it's a little bit more of that perception of how they're doing, and I think for a lot of people, you would know that, maybe my team has a really hard time bouncing back. My customer service team, when they get kind of beaten up by phone calls and stuff, are they able to be back on top of it for the next call? Are they able to bring that energy back, or do they carry that with them that they had a couple of really crabby clients on the line? And so it's really your perception as far as we're putting a number on it. There's not an exact test to it that I've seen that's incredibly effective.
Great. So the second question is how to incorporate behavioral changes in a team.
Okay, can you say that again? I'm sorry.
How to incorporate behavioral changes in a team.
No, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me. I'm sorry.
I can say that for you. I think you're probably having some voice issues. How to incorporate behavioral changes in a team.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm getting a little feedback. The behavioral changes, actually, you can turn them into something that's a little bit more positive. I have a team, a company who actually, they do these challenge competitions, these resilience competitions. And on Fridays, when they have a team meeting, usually on Friday afternoon, they do a look back at how the week went, how the sales team was doing, how the different teams were working. And they will have a competition. So everybody brings up what was a big challenge that we had come at us this week, and how did we turn that around? And it could be personal, it could be for your small team of 3 or 4 on a project, or it could be for the entire company. But we faced some big change, some big stress, some big challenge, and it looked really horrible. And this is how we turned it around. And this is how we made it more empowering, or this is how we came out with a positive outlook. And so we were able to move forward in a more effective way. What they do then, everybody tells their stories over lunch and over this meeting. And the person who comes up with the best rebound story gets the Friday afternoon off of work. So they're encouraging people to think about this before reacting, and they're encouraging their team to really think that something goes wrong, an initiative didn't work, a product failed. But how did we turn that to something better? What did we get out of that? And so because of this competition with their team members, they are working really hard to think about that, which is not a habit that we normally have. And it's starting to develop in their team members where immediately they're like, oh, I'm going to talk about this on Friday when we have the lunch meeting, because this is a great way that we rebounded from this. So they can be exercises that you're doing and different types of interactive exercises that can really help change those behaviors.
Awesome. So I'm gonna, I think the feedback was coming from Emil's side, so I'm gonna take the question, give you the question. So one of the questions says how to encourage employees to share honest feedback, especially about their managers. Fear usually doesn't get the right information to HR for taking any action. So do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot of the people that are on this call are HR professionals probably, and the whole confidentiality makes a big difference. I've seen where unfortunately a team member, and it's explaining to your team members about it, or your managers that you're asking these questions of, that this is going to be confidential, that you want examples, but you don't necessarily want to repeat that exact example. Because if I was a reactive leader and all of a sudden I got one thing that said, she lashes out after a sales failure or something, I'm like, oh, that's you. I know who that was, and then that can cause more problems. So it's then going to reinforce the behavior of not sharing. But if you can keep it to more general type feedback from the employees and really reassure them that it's completely confidential, that you are not going to be giving these specific examples to the person that needs to be addressed with them, then a lot of times that'll make them share a little bit more. That confidentiality is everything, unfortunately.
Yeah, makes sense. So I guess we've hit the 12:45 mark, and if anybody has any more questions, please post it on the chat box, and we'll make sure that we get back to you with the answers over an email. Again, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Debbie, for such a wonderful session. Really appreciate. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Are we off?